Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the San Francisco Playhouse and to our fireside chats with some of our local and national great playwrights. Uh, we're really thrilled to be doing this series, and I hope some of you, we have a little chat function on Zoom where if you want to ask the playwright a question, you can do that, and I will see what it is, and if I get a chance, I'll slip the question to them. Tonight we have a very special, almost sort of a Bay Area legend, who was one of our great artists in the Bay Area. You've all seen him on our stage a number of times, and I think this particular playwright is also a bit of a triple threat as an actor, because he does actually act, sing, dance, and write. So I guess that makes him a quadruple threat. He's also the artistic director of the San Francisco Mime Troupe and has had his plays produced in at least 14 countries around the world. He's a celebrated Black activist playwright who has had an amazing career in the whole range of theatrical professions. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Michael Gene Sullivan. How you doing, Michael?
Okay, how are you doing, Bill?
Good. Well, we're hanging in there, aren't we?
I should say one thing. I am not the artistic director of the Mime Troupe. We're a collective.
We are a collective.
So I'm co-artistic director or associate artistic director. There's like 10 of us. Valinkas is a collective member, and Keiko Shimasato and others.
Well, I apologize that because you've been the chief writer for the Mime Troupe for how many years?
I've been the resident playwright for 20 years.
For 20 years. So
yeah.
So pardon my mistake.
And I direct some shows and I act in a lot of shows. So
yeah,
around, but we keep busy.
Well, yeah. Well, we've had you on our stage in a couple of shows.
Yeah.
I know. In She Loves Me. That was an interesting.
Oh yeah.
That was an interesting role. What did you think about playing that role? How did that?
She Loves Me?
Yeah.
Playing the old actor? Well, no, let's see. She Loved Me. I was the guy who, the Marachek, the guy who has to, in the middle of the show, he'd tell people, I'd say, yeah, I'm in this musical comedy. And right in the middle, I try to kill myself because it's a musical comedy. And they're like, what? And I said, yeah, I'm on the stage. I try to blow my brains out because my wife is fooling around with some guy who works for me. And they're just like, we got to see that. So, and that is so many people, that was their favorite play. I mean, before they saw our production, and they loved our production, but they were like, that's my favorite show ever. And I was like,
how did you feel about playing a Hungarian capitalist?
Hungarian. Well, it was interesting playing. When I did research on the play, and I'm like, okay, well, my character is supposed to be an older Jewish man in a time when Hungary was going through this weird political change, and the fascists are starting to take over. And so he's trying to decide what to do. He's already changed his name because they passed a law that said you had to change your name if it was Jewish to have a more Hungarian name. So there was all of this struggle going on with the character, right, trying to fit in and not be harmed by like his employee who has more status than him because he's a pure Hungarian. And
he had some blue blood,
He had some blue blood. And so in the same way as being a Black American, dealing with what goes on in this country, how, having a business, trying to live your life, but at the same time, always being under threat that at any moment you could lose everything just because on the word of someone. And in his case, somebody who worked for him.
They could come in and cart you away.
Right. And that would be it.
The Nazis were, Hungary was, I believe, in collaboration with the Nazis to some degree. Yeah. And so the Budapest Jews didn't have the best position.
Right. Even before the war. So so in that way, I really related to the guy, this poor guy who's just trying to run his business, and having his wife who is of a different status than he is. So he'd have to work. It's like being Black in the United States and being married to a white person and knowing that you might be stopped by the cops, but she won't. you
Yeah.
know. So there was a lot with Miracek that I related to. It was a fun role, and he got to have fun and sing and survive the show.
Survived the show, but you did another show with us, I'm
Oh,
sure.
I've done a few. I did well, Dogfight, which was a lot of fun. I really liked Dogfight, and Stage Kiss, and whatchamacallit, Groundhog Day, just this
Groundhog
past
Day,
winter.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Those
I
are,
still have
those
the
are
groundhog.
those are all fun. So some musicals because you sing,
Yeah,
and Dogfight there was singing, but you played. How many parts did you play in Dogfight? You
I
had like
don't even. It was like
5, maybe.
7, something like that. Yeah, I got to have that really slinky, nice green dress as the transvestite in the opening number, and I got to play the waiter, and I got to play the tattoo artist, and I played the singer in the nightclub. Because that's always been one of my things. In order, in part, to stay employed as an actor, is to be able to play lots of roles, and I
Yep.
really like it when I'm in a show when I'm playing. Like, I think the most I did when I did uh, 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 what's that Christmas show? The It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh
I did
yeah,
Wonderful Life in Marin, and I think I played 14 people in that one.
yeah.
And at one point, I played 3 people in the same scene, and I had to
That's
have
it.
an argument with myself
And you're
until
changing your
I figured
voice.
the other one out.
Well, that's a radio play, right? It
Yeah,
was sort of like a staged radio play.
stage radio play, and the
But
same with mime troupe shows. But it's also, I always try to encourage actors to not get stuck in a type. To be you're going to have a longer career if you're a character actor. If
right.
you're an ingenue, you can age out, and that might be it. But if you can play characters and do different accents and play all these parts, you can do that, then people will think of you not just in some one role. And as a Black actor, being a Black character actor is unusual, but
In
it was
demand.
very much, it was like, if I can do this, because I did not want to be a playwright. When I was a kid, people actually thought I was going to be a writer when I was like, before I was a teenager, because I was
Mhm.
coming up with all these ideas. And I'd already written a play when I was like in the 4th grade. I wrote a play that the school did. But I was convinced that it was impossible to write comedy, which is weird because that's what I do.
That's
But
all you do.
yeah, right. And so I didn't want to do that, and I ended up becoming an actor for years. And then as I started to write for the mime troupe, I started to write individual scenes until I wrote whole shows. And then when our previous person, after 30 years, left the company, and I was like, I'm the writer left. And so luckily the next show I wrote was a big hit. And so I've been resident playwright ever since, in addition to writing every other places.
So I think a lot of people associate you as a playwright with the mime troupe, but you've written uh, lots of other plays. Uh, fairly recently, you did an adaptation of 1984 that I think ended up playing at the Alley Theater, right?
Yeah.
In Houston.
Yeah.
How was that? Was that great seeing your play up in a great big, one of the top national Lort theaters in the country?
It's been 1984 has been a really interesting ride because I wrote it in part because I was writing other plays. I was writing a one-person show. I was writing all these different shows, and I realized that all of them were an aspect of 1984. So I really wrote the play to get it out of my system. And then while I was writing it, oddly enough, I had a mutual friend with Tim Robbins,
Uh-huh.
and yeah, and the person had been talking to Robbins, and Tim said, "Well, do you know this playwright? Does he have any other shows?" Because they were talking about my work, and the guy said, "Well, he's got this 1984 he keeps talking about." And so I finished it, submitted it. So it opened at the Actors Gang originally, and the Actors
Right. Oh, that's right.
has done that show for the last about 14 years. They made it their 30th anniversary show. They've taken it overseas. They just did a production last fall that Tim Robbins was in. They've done it everywhere except for Broadway, which has been great. And they've done it on a certain level. And then other theaters started to pick it up. And then Rob Melrose, who's from San Francisco,
Right.
he'd been pitching it to the Guthrie for years, and to the Guthrie and to the public. But they were like, we're not sure. It's kind of the way I wrote the show. It's very small. And they were like, we want to do some big show. And so he had to become artistic director of the Alley finally. And he's like, okay, I've got my own Lord Theater.
I'll do the damn play if I wanna.
Right. So he put it in his first season, and it was great. It was seeing it in this huge space. But the thing was, I couldn't see it live. I was there through part of rehearsal because I had to come back to the Bay Area because I was in ragtime at Theater
Oh,
Works.
oh my God.
And, right. And so
The,
I went to Houston, and I was there for like a week and a half in rehearsals and talking about different things and trying to help the actors understand stuff. And then I had to jump on a plane right before previews. And so I left right after Tech Week to land in San Francisco to start in as Booker T. Washington in ragtime the next day.
and then all hell broke loose.
Yeah. And then a week and a half later, the show at the Alley had just opened. They had one performance.
Oh my God.
But then what they said was, well, since we're doing that, why don't we try to film it?
Right.
And so we had to go through the Orwell estate, which they're great. I mean, I've been working with the Orwell estate now for like 15 years, and they're my agent for the show. and so they set up the cameras. They came into the theater. Everybody socially distanced, except for when they were actually doing the show. And they did one take plus a couple of mistake takes, just little things. And that was one of the first of the like on YouTube Lord
Right.
Theater shows that got
So
done.
they streamed it, and is it still possible to watch that stream?
No.
I guess equity makes them take it down after the run would have been over or something, right?
Well, it's like there are different things. The Mime Troupe's dealing with this now because we're going to be releasing one of our shows.
Right.
That can only run for 2 weeks. After that, we can keep running it, but we have to keep paying the actors, and it'll depend on how much money we make. We can ask for an extension.
Right.
And when the Alley did it, they just decided to release it for the whole world to see, which was great. They told me that it was like, they gave me a list of countries that at least one person in the country had watched it. I mean, which was great because the show's already played all over the world, but in 4 languages. I'm trying to get it in. I got a Russian translation. I'm trying to get it into Moscow.
Definitely.
Yeah, but
get Mr. Putin out to see it.
Yeah, well, I had one artistic director in Moscow said he really liked the production, but there was no way Putin would let them do it.
You're kidding.
So I don't want to lose anybody their job, but I do want the Russian production done. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But
well, so that's great. So tell me a little. You were telling me a little bit this afternoon about the show, the Mime Troupe show from 2015. Is that right? Tell us about that and about what's coming up for it now and how it's more timely now maybe than it was then, or probably not.
It's always timely. Yeah, back in 2015, I wrote a show called Freedom Land, which is a tragic farce about basically the lengths that a Black grandfather will go to keep his grandson safe. Ultimately, he's lying to his grandson and telling him that his grandson has to stay in the army to learn all of these war skills so that he can lead the revolution. But really, he just wants his grandson to stay in the army because it is safer for a Black man to be in the army and overseas than it is to be on the streets in the United States. And so the grandson is tired of being in the army and he wants to get out. And the grandfather doesn't know quite how to tell him how bad things are here. And so the show is about the war on drugs, police brutality, immigration rights. It's and it's really good. It did really well, and it got really good reviews. We took it across the country. We did it in Maryland for a little while, and I was trying to get other theaters interested in the show. Like I was talking to Woolly Mammoth and the Public again, and Cleveland Public Theater, and all these different companies to say, "Do you want to bring the show because this is a really important issue?" And those theaters were like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, because the Mime Troupe we're not like a theater that talks about we're not suggesting things. We're an political activist theater.
Right.
And we're saying, this is how bad things are. And yes, the show's a farce, but it's an ugly time. And we as the audience and as the theater makers have a responsibility to actually do stuff and not say it."
Well, the Mime Troupe wears its political motives on its sleeve.
Oh, hell yeah.
as a theater company. Yeah.
And so I think that some of the theaters were like, I don't know if this might just piss people off. And we're like, yeah. And so I had to kind of put
Nothing,
it on
but
the
it's not
shelf.
funny.
But then it turned out through a really weird set of bizarre circumstances. But basically, somebody came in to shoot a trailer for us, and as a calling card for him to edit this trailer and say, "Look how good I am at this." He wasn't supposed to shoot the whole show, but he did. And it's hard for us to stop people because we're doing shows free in the parks. And so I didn't notice that he had shot the whole thing, and then afterwards he mentioned it, and I thought, well, if we're not going to tour the show, I should talk to Equity. And I've been talking to Equity ever since, and finally they gave us permission to use his version rather than the archival shoot. And so I told them about it, and they said, fine. He still got it. We don't have it yet, but now we've got permission. And so we're going to release it for a 2-week run on YouTube.
And when is that going to be?
As soon as we can.
Right.
He's editing it now because it's an important thing that we want to make sure to get out there, because we've got our summer show opening, which is going to be a series of radio plays. But this show was so on point and on time that we want to get it out there as soon as we can. So we're drawing up the contracts now, and as soon as we can open it, as soon as we can get it on YouTube, once he's done, we get it on. We've got the contracts. So it should be before July, which I know sounds...
So any day now. So
how
are people, we're all going to want to watch that. How are we going to find out about it? I guess it'll be publicized and everything, right?
Yeah.
Is it going to be anybody in the world can watch it? Are you going to charge $10 or?
No, it's going to be by donation, because we've talked about it, and we're like, well, we do shows free in the parks. People always wonder how we make money since we don't take corporate dough, but we do it through donations. And so we're just going to put it on as a, donate what you can. If you want to become a longer term supporter of the Mime Troupe, that would be great. If you can only afford $1, fine. It's about us getting the message out to the working class.
Right.
So hopefully we'll get something hopefully we'll get something in the newspaper and some radio stations and stuff. It's mainly going to be all the publicity that we can do that we can afford.
Well, let us know. We can tag it onto a weekly blast,
That'd be great.
Kind of thing, especially because of the times. Because the times, it's such an important thing, and we want to support. I think it's a great way to support Black Lives Matter. This show,
yeah,
absolutely right.
When we did the show originally, we had we would do post-show discussions in the park. We were only going to do a few, and we ended up doing a bunch of them. Jeff Adachi spoke at one of them, and we had people from Black Lives Matter, and we also had people from what was it like? An organization that helps ex-convicts get back to work, to reintroduce themselves to the society, and defunding the police organizations, and all of these different people, and immigrants' rights, because that's part of the script also. All of these different people talking after the show. So when we do this show, we'll do post-show like Zoom or YouTube discussions after them also.
That'd be great. I think that's something that nobody's really done yet, is put on a piece of entertainment and then invite people to stay and discuss it. Like you sort of expand the Zoom screen or something and go say, hey, you can just jump on this screen and listen to the talk back, we would do in the theater after shows. But that's really exciting. That's fantastic. Tell me a little bit about, I want to talk about theater and the current movement, the current revolution that's happening in our country, and how theater fits into that. But just tell me a little bit about the summer Mime Troupe show that you're working on, the radio series, right?
Yeah. I wanted to, once it turned out that we weren't going to be able to do the shows in the park, but I wanted to do something. And so we decided to do Tales of the Resistance, which is 4 different radio plays, each one with 2 episodes. And then in the end, 1 hour-long episode where all the stories merge. And different characters from different plays are in other episodes. This is all in my head. And so one show is about a Black man who's been fired for unionism, for trying to create a union in his office. But and each one is done in a different style. So that one is a detective noir story. Then there's one where there's a nurse who is working towards trying to have a vaccine against COVID-19. She's trying to work on that research, and that one is kind of an adventure soap opera. And then there's a horror story with this MAGA hat wearing guy who sees himself as a good cop, and how the ghosts that haunt him. And then another one that's a
Ooh, I
sci-fi
like that.
story that's about a guy who's working on a voting app. And what does that mean for us?
A voting app? Uh-oh. You froze. You there? Looks like everything is okay. Donnie, have we got a technical issue here? Well, I'll text him. Ah, the joys of Zoom in the world. Yeah,
Me again.
there he is. Ah, Zoom strikes again.
I know. It has been, like I said, so we're trying to do readings like this. And so we decided to just
Yeah.
home for our personal recordings so the engine edits them together. And so dealing with racism and with sexism and with an anti-science mentality that this
Right.
country has developed. And in this particular time, so people are asking me, they're always like, well, how do you feel with all this stuff going on? I'm like, this is great, because this is a chance, an opportunity for so much stuff to evolve and change into what this country should be. A country that benefits the workers who make things, who actually are the source of the wealth. This is a chance for us to level so many things with police brutality and the Me Too movement and immigrants' rights. And who knows, maybe we'll get national health care. We're in this time of opportunity. And so for a company like the Mime Troupe and a writer like me, I'm like writing stuff like this. And suddenly people are like, oh, we want to see this show and we want to do this show. And what does the Mime Troupe think about this? And I'm like, thank you for
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah. Well, you've always been on the cutting edge of resistance and of exposing the ills of our capitalist system and our racist system. And it seems like, in a way, you're in a position to really continue doing that at a higher level where people are liable to pay a little bit more attention.
Yeah. Being able to put something online, which is something we've been wanting to do for a long time, because we used to tour around the country and around the world. I mean, I've been across the country and overseas a bunch of times with the Mime Troupe. But as the country has kind of been in a undeclared depression for the last 25 or so years,
Yeah.
it's been really difficult. Places just don't have the money to bring us. And this is a chance for them, for good or ill, to be able to see a Mime Troupe show because they'll
Right.
be able to see Freedom Land and they'll be able to hear these other shows. And hopefully, even if we can't tour, it might be something we can do in the future, working with Actors Equity, and say, maybe at the end of every run, at the end of every summer, the show goes online for 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. So yeah, let Donnie and I know, when it's going up and how long it's going to run and which episodes, and we'll give it a plug.
Thanks. Yeah,
You
I
know,
just wrote the press release last night. So, so I'll send it to you when we have some dates.
bada bing, bada bing. So the world we're living in. I mean, it's funny because I ordinarily have been asking playwrights what they think is going to be, what writers are going to be interested in doing, and how COVID will change art, will change theater.
Yeah.
And then, the George Floyd murder and all of the ensuing protests have it is to believe, pretty much completely eclipsed the COVID moment, to
Yeah.
where it at the moment it seems a little like old news, because this revolution taking place in our cities and in our is so powerful and has sort of really dominated the airways
Yeah.
in a great way.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of a no-brainer to ask you as a playwright what you're going to be writing about, because
Yeah.
that's what you're always writing about.
I'm writing
You
about,
know?
yeah.
But
That's been my last bunch of years.
I am interested. There has been, I think, I'm not sure that a lot of our audience, people that are watching right now, really know how that Black Lives Matter crisis and revolution has moved into the theater world,
Yeah.
and how powerfully that Black Lives Matter movement has kind of taken over theater, taken over
Well,
American theater. And I sort of would like to hear some of your reflections on that. And
well, that idea that has been creeping up really since, I don't know, since the non-traditional casting conferences that happened in the 80s, where people were saying the stage has to reflect the actual world, not just, in our case, it's like Pacific Heights or Seacliff or something like that.
right.
And so that idea of plays that look like the actual city, wherever you happen to be, has kind of grew a lot. And there are a lot of theaters that did focus on that. Like Playhouse theaters were like, we need to show the world as it is to our audience. But a lot of theaters would like, as a Black playwright, I talk to other Black playwrights, and so often we're fighting over Black History Month. Who's going to get the Black History Month slot? Because that's when they're going to do the Black play. And to know that that's what we might get, and the Asian playwrights are just out of luck, and Latino playwrights are like, they're hoping that their city, wherever it has a big enough Latino population, that the theater will care. Because so often theaters look at their board, who's giving them money, and they don't want to offend the board. I mean, I remember talking to an artistic director one time who said, was it possible for them to cut some of the stuff from a production of Christmas Carol that talked about bankers and money lending? Because that's what, Scrooge is a banker. But they didn't want the bankers to come off too badly because they had bankers on their board. They wanted to suck all the politics and social awareness that is in Christmas Carol out of it and just make it a lighthearted Christmas farce with dancing vegetables. And
what
so,
the Dickens?
Yeah, right. Screw Dickens. What the Dickens? And so having theaters that challenge the audience, and I think this is one of the things that's really going to come into question, is the whole idea of the subscriber base. Because theaters, if you're relying on a subscriber base, you have to kind of please the subscriber base. And so that's going to be a challenge, is to get the subscribers to accept being challenged with every show and not just that one or two in the season.
Right.
And also, I think another thing is going to be finding a way to make sure that all the theaters, like you guys do this, and it's great, are part of the community. The job of theater is the place where when something freaky happens, everybody can kind of come to theater and be entertained, and they want to think and they want to feel, but they also want some part of the world explained to them.
Right.
And a lot of theaters have lost that. And so when it comes to something like Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, they can't just turn around and go, oh, we haven't put in enough women's plays. We're going to do all women's plays for this season, but not really any season after that. We need to be able to make the boards of directors look more like the community, and to fully fund theater on a state, city, and national level, so that we're not reliant on corporations who are never going to want us to say anything bad about capitalism. That's why I remember talking to an artistic director of a major Lord theater, and she was like, what should we do? And this was a long time ago. I don't know why she was asking me. And I said, well, why don't you guys do Three Penny Opera or do some Brecht? And she went, oh God, no one's going to do Brecht because it would offend all of the funders.
Socialist. Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, that's an awful reason. If that's a reason to quit theater, if you're going to say that, you shouldn't be in the business, because your business is to be truth tellers. And if capital is the problem, then capital needs to be called to account. Just like if the police are the problem, they need to be called to account. And so I think, like I said, getting back to your original point, with Black Lives Matter, that a lot of theaters, I think, are realizing that they were using Black plays and Black playwrights not to challenge the audience, but to make the audience feel a little better about themselves. And also, it was a way to raise money for those theaters. Look, we're going to do Susan Lloyd Parks this year.
We're liberal. We're good.
Yeah, we're liberal, and ooh, look at us. And then the rest
Yeah.
of the season, it's just like, it's not even open cast or creatively cast.
Well, and I think the problem that's really being exposed right now is that theaters, I mean, like San Francisco Playhouse, that represent our community well on stage.
Mm-hmm.
You look at our stage and it looks like our community. And we, non-traditional casting in the sense of casting people in roles that are generally played by white people. But
Yeah.
in this case, we're just we don't care, but we're not, we realize that when it comes to the inherent, underlying systematic racism in this country, that we're more of a contributor to the problem. In the sense that our board and our staff and our designers don't resemble the community. That we have this kind of, we're not intending to practice tokenism, but I think it does have that effect.
Yeah, well, that is when it used to be that a lot of boards, like I remember when Intersection there was a friend of mine who was on the Intersection for the Arts board, and they had a very diverse, economically diverse board, which is really important, especially when everybody says they want to reach out and they want to get, other people to come to their theater. And it's like, well, you need an economically and racially and gender identified, all of these different things on the board, because they're going to be making the decisions, and not just, George Gershwin's grandson or something like that, who brings a name and brings money. Another thing that I think would really help theaters, and I think it's an easy thing to do.
Oops. We lost you again. Okay. Well, darn. It seems like the powers of Zoom and the powers of the internet are conspiring to keep Michael Gene from finishing that thought. Let me just wait a little minute. Hang in there with me, everybody. I think probably he's going to be back. I texted him that he was frozen. I don't know that he knows he is. Gosh.
Me again.
There you are.
Don't know why.
It's okay.
But anyway.
It's just one of those things we were talking about, the things that theater can do in terms of diversifying their boards. And you were talking about the Intersection and not having
that was one of them.
Not having Irving Berlin's grandson on the board.
Yeah, right. Oh, well, what I was going to say, though, is one of the things that I think I would love it if more theaters did was to leave one slot in their season as a TBA slot, basically, so that if something happens, if revolution breaks out, if whatever happens, if terrible things happen, that playwrights, we respond quickly. We can go, this is what's going on in the world, and write a play. I wrote, after 1984 had opened, actually before 1984 opened at the Alley, they asked me, they said, what else are you interested in doing? What's your next play? And I said, well, I've got this play in my head, The Great Con, and it's about, basically how hard it is for Black teenagers to be teenagers in the United States. They're expected to be grown-ups right away, and how it's easier for them to accept the stereotype and be the stereotype, but that it's a struggle. So, and I wrote it as it's a comedy, but it's about this really serious issue. And I said, well, this is the show that's in my head. And they said, if you can write that before June, maybe we'll put it in our next year's new play festival. Right. So I wrote it right away because I've been thinking about it for a while. And then with all of the stuff going on, I was like, this is the play that I need to write right now. We as playwrights can sometimes write something. We can lock ourselves in a room and write a whole play in a weekend that has to do with that specific time. And that's the question that the audience has in their mind. And they might be able to hold that for a little while, but they can't hold it for 2 years. And theaters are always like, well, it's 2 years from now, maybe we can get back to this revolutionary moment. 2 years from now, we'll be able to deal with Me Too. 2 years from now. And it's like, no, if you want people to rush to your theater to see cultural and social and did you freeze again? No, good. Okay.
No, you're good.
All right. You were just really still. To have not just, retirees and not just Silicon Valley millionaires, but to have average people go, oh my God, this issue that I'm dealing with in my life is being dealt with on that stage right now, or in the next season even.
Well, I will confess that I do have a TBA in the next season. Of course.
Yes.
Of course, the whole season is turned into TBA now because I can't. Yeah. It's a little difficult to do some of the titles that we announced before the COVID thing happened. There's a great big casts, and
yes, like also that big musical about the flu not being a big deal.
But I'm with you. Create a spot, and then Berkeley Rep kind of did that. I think either they had an open spot or something. They lost some play or other, and didn't they wrote an adaptation of it. It Can't Happen Here.
Right, Tony wrote that
to get in before the election.
Right, and he was like, because they had something else there, and they were like, "We've got a space. We should do this." And I didn't see the show. I was busy. I was in a show, but that kind of it's like to think about that ahead of time and go, something's going to happen. We have an occupier of the White House who at any moment, almost anything could happen. And for the next few years, that's the way it's going to be. And I think it's going to be easier. And not only does it give theaters a chance to be nimble and not stolid institutions that nobody wants to go to, but exciting places because so often theaters will come up with these exciting plays, but they have to generate the excitement because they have to tell the audience why this show is so exciting, why this playwright is interesting, what this issue is. But if the issue is going on outside, you don't have to do that. You just go, that protest you were at, there's a play about it right now.
Sounds like a great idea for a company.
Yeah. Well, Lauren Gunderson and I talked about that at one point.
Yeah. She's very into writing about topical issues. She's always just passionate about whatever's happening and wants to write about it immediately.
Right.
Aaron Loeb is the same way. He always is wanting to write about what's going on right now. And I think ultimately that's what theater is for. Theater is like, I described the stage as a giant mirror. That's all it really is. It's a 32-foot wide by 18-foot tall mirror that we get to see ourselves in. And so and what people are struggling with, in the very moment in which they're living is what they need the help with. The perspective.
Right. Perspective, yes.
And that's what you're for.
Some kind of conversation. Yeah, right. But the people when I wrote 1984, whenever I write a play, there's this question that every playwright gets asked, which is infuriating, but somehow theaters don't know this question is infuriating, which is you write the play, they read it, they like it, and they say, what are your plans with this play? To get it produced. That's the plan. The plan is for you to fall in love with it and go, oh my goodness, this is great. It's like, it's such and we're always
what in your plans for this play that you have written?
What are my plans are I actually told one literary manager that my plan was to win the lottery and produce the play myself. I said, my fallback plan is you fall in love with it and decide to do it. Right. So it's always frustrating because we write the plays because we have this passionate this magma boiling inside of us to answer this question for ourselves and for society in general. But like I said, theaters are like, well, even if we want to do it, you have to wait because we've got this NEA grant and because we've already committed to this or committed to that. So I looked up at my son. He's in a loft right here.
Oh,
and
hi.
so, yeah, no, looking at me like I'm crazy, but he always does that. And so that we need theaters, and this is not a selfish thing on my part, just as a playwright. It's, I think the way theaters are going to have to survive is to really think of themselves as community theaters. There is, a community theater just means you're in the community rather
Right.
than sitting on it.
Right. You're down
It's
in
not
it.
about how much you pay. It's not about whether you're equity or not. You're always a community theater because you're speaking to and for the community. And like I said, I think the best way is just leave a slot and excite your audience about, we're going to do something in that slot, and make that part of the season every year. That it's like, and this
Either
exciting
that
new play that
or
deals
just
with today's issues.
leave all the slots.
Yeah. Well, you got to sell them something.
Listen, I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your evening, but that was fantastic. So much fun.
So much fun talking to you.
Yeah, we'll do it more, and we'll talk more about that very thing, about the idea of open slots and opportunistic playwriting.
Yeah.
That I have found though that when I have left, and I've had some board members that didn't really like the open slot, and it's a little more difficult to market, like a certain, marketing director of mine will say, well, it's a little hard to market a play that we don't know what the play is. So
Yeah,
better if you
exactly.
don't have open slots for selling subscriptions. But it's every time I do it, I am thrilled with what happens to come along. Like a theater our size, we don't compete with the big boys for the top titles, this ACT or Berkeley Rep or Theater Works. They're always going to get it ahead of us. But they pick their season, and I've got a TBA, and then all of a sudden some great place suddenly becomes available, and bang, I'm there. So I'm a fan.
That is going to happen every year. Your marketing director needs to accept that and be able to sell the excitement of a blank slate.
Now be nice to him, because he's in charge of this conversation. He's just going to cut us off.
That's what you got to do. The world is always changing. Revolution is in the street, and people want answers. What was I going to say? Yeah. So it's nice talking to you and having a chance to see you. And
it's great.
We'll all be out of our homes and out there.
Really?
And also, and I know you know this, but I think it's really important for people to remember, all theater is political.
Yes.
You're either upholding the status quo or you are challenging the status quo. Those are your choices. And it is important for all of us that make theater to remember that's what makes it passionate, and that's what puts butts in the seats.
Thank you, Michael Gene. We'll see you soon. Thanks so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to our Fireside chat once again. Next week, we're going to be chatting with Julie Bear, who you may remember from The Tree. We did a play about 4 or 5 years ago that Carl Lumley and Susie were both in. And actually, it's just called Tree. But she's a wonderful writer. She's a very skillful, experienced writer. She's been a showrunner for a lot of Hollywood television shows, and she's just amazing. And she'll be with us next Thursday. So thank you so much for coming. If you'd like to make a contribution to the San Francisco Playhouse, we'd be thrilled to accept it. Please enjoy your evening. Thank you so much.